our agenda today is to learn about the OmniCycle and all the things it can do. And I wanted to talk about it because sometimes we see cycle and we think, okay, it's a bike. And I want to really highlight what sets the OmniCycle apart from other bikes that we might see. And some of the things that we're going to be looking at are we're going to be seeing that, we get a lot of enhanced biofeedback options, and then we can also collect some data, some objective data, so that we can actually use that in our documentation. There are customizations. The therapist can decide and make decisions based on that individual patient's needs. That's super awesome and important. It's portable. We can roll it. We'll talk a little bit about that in a coming slide, but we want to make sure that we can access our patients wherever they may be. So if it's in the therapy gym, if it's at the bedside, if it's up on a unit, we can take it with us. It has a motor assist smart technology. I will go into that a little bit more in depth. We also see that it is going to be able to be interconnected with AC Plus interconnected platform, and we'll be reviewing that at the end. And then finally, it's versatile, right? So we can work with the bike, the OmniCycle, on a variety of functional levels, and that's going to be super important when we talk about integration. So I first wanted to review what smart cycle technology means, and what it basically is that the OmniCycle is able to determine how much that patient needs help or doesn't need help for a specific task. So this is really important when somebody might be very, very weak, and we want to give them the benefit of that repetitive motion and a sustained exercise, but they aren't strong enough to go completely through that cycle themselves. The motor will actually assist them. Or maybe it's a discrepancy between the right leg and the left leg. We want to make sure that they're actively able to get the assist for one side and allow some resistance possibly on the other side. So that's what we call that smart cycle and this motor assisted technology. And the goal is that eventually the patient's going to increase their participation level, and we can be doing full on resistance, strength training and aerobic exercise as they tolerate. So the goal obviously is to work up towards that independent cycling. So that's one definite plus to this OmniCycle. I want you to take a look at it and kind of take a feel for what it looks like. And I'm going to point out a couple of key things. The first thing you're going to notice probably is that you don't see a seat, right? You don't see a chair for this person to sit in. That's because it's designed to allow us to take the patient up with a wheelchair and still have somebody who might not be able to transfer to a separate seat get the benefit of a sustained exercise program. So that is something that we definitely have. At the bottom, you're going to see the wheels that we have. The wheels enable us to tip the OmniCycle and then roll it. As I mentioned, it's portable. It can go different places in the facility if need be. And as I mentioned, designed for wheelchair access. And you see we have these two safety straps. I'm going to be talking about that at the end of the presentation, and Lindsay will be able to demonstrate how those work when we get to the demonstration section at the end. We also want to talk a little bit about the fact that it is adjustable. So if I have somebody that might have a leg length discrepancy, or maybe I have somebody with longer limbs, I can adjust the foot pedals if I'm doing a lower extremity cycle program, and I have that option. I also have the ability to choose different styles of hand grips. So if I have a patient that has difficulty in certain positions, I can alter that, and that is a very quick on and off option with the hand grips. We also have the ability to change the height for the upper extremity cycling. If I want that patient to be with less shoulder flexion, I can lower it. If I want to increase their shoulder flexion up, I can alter that as well. Obviously, shorter, taller patients. And then we also have the ability to move the top portion of the OmniCycle forward and back, again, to assist with us with positioning of the patient. When we are doing the OmniCycle lower extremity, we have the ability to lock the upper extremity cycle portion off so that the patient isn't confused thinking they should be doing the arms and the legs. Moving up more, we do have the ability to monitor the heart rate and set some parameters from the cardiovascular standpoint. There is also a audible stop feature. So if the patient says that stop, it will actually shut that bike down. That's something that we have as a safety feature. Our interactive biofeedback system, we have a nice screen. We're going to be going into this in depth in a couple of slides, but we want to make sure that the patient is engaged and actually making some decisions about what they're doing based on what they're seeing on the screen. And that's where we get some of this biofeedback right? That biofeedback is certainly something that makes the OmniCycle unique. And then finally, as I mentioned, we have that active assisted option. So we are able to very smoothly have that patient transition to being assisted through the motion to actually getting resistance, again, as deemed appropriate for that particular patient. And finally, a nice, large, easy to see, really good differentiation of colors and font so that the patient can visualize what they see, even if they have some visual challenges. So that's kind of an overview about what the OmniCycle is looking like. A couple things I actually just realized I didn't mention. We do have calf straps, so we can help position that lower extremity, and foot straps as well if the patient's having difficulty holding their foot on the pedal. Okay, so let's take a closer look at that screen. Now, there is a lot going on this slide. I'm going to take my time and go through it so you get a feel for all of the different ways that we can be modifying or adjusting as indicated. We're going to go into more depth into some of these options as we move further through the demonstration, but just to sort of orient you to what's happening on our home screen. First, we're going to talk about at the top here, this program bar, and you might be able to tell that says neuro. I can press that bar and I can move through the various options for my biofeedback. And we will be going through these again in depth as we move forward. But that's how it's a touch screen. So you're just able to press on the screen and change the program. That will be done obviously before you start the program. Then we have the ability to increase or decrease the resistance level or the power output. So it depends on the program I've chosen. Sometimes it's a resistance level, sometimes it's the power output, but that will be able to be changed for the, either increasing or decreasing as appropriate via that resistance level section of the screen. This program selection tool, sometimes we call it the toolbox, sometimes we call it a wrench, you get the idea. This is what is going to allow us to enter into the various programs and really customize them for our patients. We will be talking about this in depth coming up as well. You can see that I also have a choice to pick between upper and lower extremity. I wanted to talk about this a little bit because it has arms and legs, very often sometimes it's perceived that, oh, you can do the arms and the legs. And ideally, we really want that patient to be focusing on the program and focusing on the biofeedback. So really we are going to be doing it, that motor is going to be working either the legs or the arms. So that is a distinction that's important to be made. And again, when we're talking about biofeedback, we really want that patient to be focused on the legs, if that's my goal for that session, or the arms, if the arm strength is my goal for that session. So that's where you would select either the upper or the lower extremity. Moving across to the other side, we are going to see where we can monitor our heart rate. I mentioned to you that we can monitor that. Obviously, we need to have a heart rate sensor. So we have a chest strap option that's available, and that will be able to be picked up by the unit, and we can then determine, is that person working in the appropriate heart rate zone if it's an aerobic exercise program. And then we even have the capability of setting parameters so that if they meet that heart rate, we will get a little bit of a notice that, hey, we might need to turn that down. We want to keep that patient in our zone that we've chosen. So that's via the heart rate monitor section. You can see we can also adjust the RPM speed. So as I mentioned, sometimes the patient isn't able to really do a lot on their own, and we're just trying to get them moving a little bit. So the machine is going to have a default low kind of range of motion that it can be going through. And then as the patient starts to actively participate, that RPM number will probably go much higher. And we'll talk about how we're going to use that as we customize our exercises with our patients moving forward. We also have the ability to press this reset to default. The unit is going to be set up with a lot of default, maybe it's 15-minute duration, maybe it's certain settings. Sometimes somebody will customize it, and the next therapist coming to work with their patient wants to reset it so that it's back to the regular manufacturer's defaults. You just have to press that little portion of the screen and it will reset to default. And then finally, we have this assisted entry feature, which is super nice when we are talking about patients who might be very weak or have difficulty lifting their legs up onto the pedals. When we press this button, it will automatically position the pedals in the lowest position on one side so that I can have that patient get their foot in, I can assist them with strapping. And then when I press this assisted entry button again, it will rotate 180 degrees. So the other side's pedal is now at that lowest point. And it really does make it easier to get that patient in comfortably in and settled into the pedals when we're doing the lower extremity exercise. Some of these I skipped in the start stop. I think it's pretty obvious distance, so I didn't take too much time. But this is, again, sort of an orientation to that home screen, what you're going to see when you first get that patient up onto the OmniCycle. I mentioned that toolbox. I wanted to talk a little bit about how this folder management works and how you can access different things. Now, obviously, I'm just going to be showing one example. When you start going and looking at the OmniCycle, and you can look in the user manual, it does a really good job of showing you what's available for the different programs. You can play around and really customize this for your patient. But just to give you an idea, I'm going to press that little wrench button to open up that toolbox. And once I'm in there, then you're going to see then that my programs show up. So I kind of think of these as folders. So right now I'm into my folders, and I have a neuro folder, an ortho folder, a cardio folder. And if I keep pressing that down arrow, I'm going to see my other biofeedback options, which we're going to talk about. But we have soccer, porcupine, and the traffic jam. And then after that, you're going to see a system folder, and the system folder has all sorts of good stuff in it, like the microphone sensitivity and some other things. So once I've selected the program, the folder that I want to open, if this case it's showing you an example with ortho being highlighted, I can either tap ortho or press the green check button. Again, to the next picture, they obviously picked cardio. Now the cardio folder is open, and within the cardio folder, that's where I can look at duration, what type of biofeedback do I want to give. If you kept pressing that down arrow, you would see other options, including heart rate. I told you there were some heart rate parameters that I can put in, all sorts of things. Again, I press that check button to accept it. This is showing you an example. They selected the time. I can select 15 minutes, press that check button. Now 15 minutes will be that person's program. And I also wanted to just show you how if you kept toggling down into some of the other folders, this is where that system folder is. And if I opened up the system folder, I can modify some things, and I can decide, you know what, we're always doing a certain time frame. I'm going to set that to be the default now. So that default will be 10 minutes instead of 15 minutes, as just an example. So you can play around with that just a little bit. All of that is accessed way back up at the beginning via this wrench or toolbox button, which is on that main home screen. Okay, so you've made your selections, you get your patient up, they're starting their exercise, and now we have the screen has changed a little bit. Now we're in our in-exercise screen. So I wanted to point out a couple of things that while the patient is actively exercising, the therapist can be adjusting, monitoring, making note of, or changing. The first is going to be, I can still up or down, increase or decrease that resistance or the motor output. So for example, let's say I want to have that patient start their program and I want to have them warm up at a low resistance for the first couple of minutes, right? So I might have it at a 1 or a 0 even resistance. And after 2 minutes in, I decided that now we're going to be ready to go up to a 2 or a 3, depending on that patient. All I have to do is press the up arrow, the plus button, and that will automatically increase it. I don't have to stop them and restart it. We have this button here that says lightning bolts. Right now it's red. That means it's active and engaged. And that is a spasticity detector or a spasm detector. Sometimes we have patients that have spasms when we're trying to elicit rhythmic movement. And when that happens, we want the machine to sort of recognize that's happening. Not only can I monitor how often, because my goal might be to lower that, but I can also assist me in having that patient maybe go into a different direction once that spasm is detected. So that's something that we have. If that's not a goal, you can just tap that button and turn that lightning bolt from red to white, and that will disengage it for that treatment session. Here at the bottom, obviously, I can monitor the time. So let's say I've decided that this patient is having not as good of a day. I might decide that I don't want them to be on as long as I thought I was going to. All I need to do is press that down button next to that clock face, and I can decrease the duration, again, while it's running. Possibly, I want to change from going in a forward direction to a reverse direction. Maybe I have some goals where I want that patient to work in the opposite direction. So after a certain period of time, I could jump in and say, you know what, Mrs. Smith, I'm going to go ahead and have you go backwards now. All I have to do is tap that button where you see those up and down arrows, and the machine will stop, right? That active assisted piece will stop very gently and then resume going the other direction. So that is a forward or reverse cycling adjustment when we're in the middle of an exercise program. And then finally, I can monitor or change that baseline RPM, that revolutions per minute, right? So if I'm doing some passive range of motion or some very slow motion, that's great. The default is a 10 RPM, but maybe I want them to be going a little bit faster than that. I can change that. As the patient is actively pedaling, this is the number that you're going to look at to determine, are they doing, you know, where I want them to be? Are they upping their performance? I would love for them to be acting a little bit more robustly. So let me look at that RPMs and see how quickly they're able to accomplish those revolutions per minute. Final thing to talk about on this is this power output in the center here. And you can see that when the patient is actively engaged, this yellow light bulb lights up. If the patient is truly not participating and the machine is doing all of the work, you will see that that light bulb will go to white and will not be illuminated anymore. So that's a good quick check to see how much is going on. Is that patient working where I want them to be? And when they are actively engaged, that yellow light bulb will turn on. Okay. All of the changes that I just talked about, I want to reinforce to you guys, these are skilled decisions that the therapist is making in response to how the patient is doing, right? So all of these things need to be discussed and documented to support your billing and your skilled intervention with an exercise program. So don't forget, we're going to be talking a little bit about documentation at the end. I just wanted to remind you that the therapist is making all of these decisions, right? All of that brain power should be recorded and should be obviously considered a skilled intervention. Okay, we're going to go through all of the different biofeedback options that are available for the clinician to choose from. And you're going to see that they will have some differences based on the level of cognitive ability the patient might have or the goals that the therapist has. Again, choosing the biofeedback is a skilled mental decision that the therapist is making before we start the exercise program. The first one I want to talk about is an upper extremity biofeedback that is available in the neuro mode, okay? And this is really looking at, is that patient actively participating, actively performing, and what do I see happening? So the goal is going to be this green happy face that you can see on the left. If the patient has really slowed down and is really not doing the optimal RPM zone or handling that resistance, you're going to see I kind of get to this kind of sad, you know, sleepy face in the middle. So we want to engage that patient. Hey, Mrs. Smith, keep pedaling. I want that green happy face. Can you go a little quicker? Can you pay a little attention when you see that green go away? I want you to try to make sure you're pedaling. Try to make sure you're using those arms. Or if I'm going too fast and I'm going too I always kind of consider it sort of like asymmetrically kind of random, just too quick and too fast. You're going to see kind of not so happy face in yellow. And again, we're going to cue them to try to get to that green. So what you see on the screen here at the top is that power, the time. Again, you still have the ability to change all of those things along the side panels. Next, we have a biofeedback option that it can be either the arms or the legs. And this is a RPM or revolutions per minute based biofeedback. So you can see we have a soccer goalie in front of the net. We have a ball coming towards the net. The patient's job is to get that goalie in front of the ball and block the shot, right? So the goal is that no ball gets into the net, right? We want to have a perfect score. So one of the things we're going to be doing is we're going to be deciding how well and how quickly do I want this patient to be turning the cycle, okay? So depending on that, I'm going to choose a level, okay? So the set resistance will remain the same, and I can adjust that as they're in the exercise. But before starting, the therapist needs to choose the indicated level by going into that toolbox, right? Going into the soccer folder, and in the soccer folder, there will be a folder called level. And under the level, we need to choose minimal, moderate, or maximum. Okay, so you can see on the chart on the bottom, I kind of gave you an idea what the difference is between the different levels. The important thing to look at is that active RPM range of 20 to 35 revolutions per minute. That will keep that goalie in front of the net. So they might go a little faster to move up, right? They might go pedal a little slower to drop down. But if they go too slow, the goalie will be down at the bottom, which is not what we want. Or if they're going too fast, they'll be above the net and they won't be able to block that goal. So your goal here is that the patient will maintain RPMs between 20 and 35 throughout that session. And we're just giving them that incentive and that sort of fun factor of biofeedback to help them engage and keep themselves in that RPM zone that I'm going for my aerobic exercise goal example for that patient. And then if I chose different levels, obviously moderate is going to be faster, maximal will be even faster. You can also see that the size of the ball and the speed of the ball will also change as you choose between those different levels. This can also be accomplished in the forward or backwards direction. So you can alter that as you go. So this is going to be either upper or lower extremity. It's based on the RPMs, and you're giving that patient a goal range to be pedaling that cycle, whether it's upper or lower extremity. We also have a motor assisted biofeedback, and this is something that is interesting. It's kind of a different concept. So you'll see that there's a single bar that's the visual biofeedback you're providing that patient. And that bar is representing how much is the motor actually working to move that patient, right? So if that bar is completely full blue, the motor will be doing 100% of the work. So in this one, what's going to happen is for the first minute, the patient's going to be doing their performance, and the machine, the OmniCycle, is going to be actually sensing how much is that motor working. And then it's going to set a start line, which you can see in that picture. It's a little gray, it's a little light, but that start line is a goal, all right? And I actually want to cue that patient to keep that blue bar below that start line, because I want the patient to do more and the motor to do less, if that makes sense, right? So you're kind of giving that biofeedback. Clinically, I feel like this is really, really helpful. Also, when we want to promote relaxation, or if we have somebody that's very resistant to movement, we want them not to be fighting. If they're fighting, the motor is working harder, so the blue bar will go high. If they're relaxed and the motor is working less, it will allow them to get through that motion. So it's kind of a different style of biofeedback. It is available. Again, it's called the assisted mode. Now we're going to move into our lower extremity biofeedback options. And the first one we're going to see, that's kind of the one that pops up if you're in either the lower extremity cardio, ortho, or neuro, is you're going to see the option for our symmetry bar biofeedback, which is a left versus right lower extremity, and allows us to really cater to the patient who might be asymmetrical in strength, where I'm cueing this patient. So in this example, the left leg is not working as hard as the right. And I want that patient to try to be more symmetrical. So my cues and my instruction to the patient, Mr. Jones, your left leg's not working as much as I'd like. Really push hard on that left leg. See if you can get those two bars to be equal. That would be ideal. Can you do that? See if you can push harder on that left. And so you're really able to engage that patient for that asymmetrical concern and give them some feedback when they actually are performing a little bit better on that weaker side. The other option that we have is a symmetry road. It's called symmetry road in your biofeedback option. And this is going to be that, the patient is going to be that little red triangle at the bottom of the screen. Even pedaling between right and left will put me right down the center of the road. There will be obstacles that come forward as the patient is pedaling. And the goal is to move away from the obstacle so that you don't run into it. So you can see on the right side, I've got this obstacle coming up. I am over on the right, which is not a good thing. That's why the obstacle has red lines on it. I'm going to actually be cueing my patient to push hard on their left leg, and that will actually move my triangle to the left side of the road, and I want to keep it there until I'm past that obstacle on the right. So this actually alternates right versus left. So it just starts engaging that patient into sort of that concept of, okay, push harder on my right. I'm going to go right. I need to get around that. And now I'm going to go left. I'm going to go left. And so it's starting to kind of have them think of some motor control concepts, right? We're trying to engage right. When can they start their left working a little harder than their right? And are they paying attention cognitively to what's happening on the screen? When you're in this screen, you can actually press the start button and switch back and forth between these two options. So if you get going and you decide that you want to give them a little bit of an added challenge and you want to go back to that cemetery road, you can just hit that start button. You don't have to stop and restart. And that's a really great way of kind of toggling and adjusting according to your patient's performance. Okay, still on lower extremity options. Here we're looking at the fact that we have the porcupine, right? And the descent of how quickly things are falling is going to be another level that we have to set. Again, resistance is going to stay the same. I have to choose this before starting. I have to go into that toolbox, go into the level, and choose, do I want minimal, moderate, or max, right? How quickly is that object going to fall? And do I want that object to be really big so the patient has a nice target, or I want them to really have to fine tune things in the maximum level that will be a smaller target that they're aiming for. Once again, forwards or backwards. And again, the goal here, very similar to that cemetery road, is I need to move my porcupine left. I'm going to push hard on my left. If I'm doing even pedaling, I'll be in the center of the screen. So the patient, again, is adjusting, fine tuning their performance and their decision making, right versus left, based on what they're seeing happening on the screen. We have traffic jam as our final biofeedback option. This one is great also. Set resistance remains the same. I can change it as I need to. Again, I need to go into that toolbox, just sort of repeating the same themes here. In that toolbox, we have a level folder where I'm going to choose minimal, moderate, or maximum. I'll talk about that in a second. But I also can keep scrolling down, and there's a lane pre-selection folder where I can choose right, left, random, and frontal. So let me talk about the game a little bit before we go into that. This is, again, push hard on your left leg. This will move my vehicle, which is that red car, to the left. If I push hard on the right, it will move me to the right. So in the minimal level, there will be no other cars on the road, and your goals are just to kind of have that patient maybe play around, stay in the center, which would be even right, left pedaling. In moderate, I'm going to have another vehicle on the screen with me. So you can see in this picture, the black car. So the patient needs to try to stay away from the far left, because if not, they'll crash into the car. Right? So we're going to be either even pedaling to stay in the center lane, or I'm going to push hard on my right to move over to the right. And then in maximal, the maximal level, you'll have multiple cars. You have more than one car. So it kind of gets a little intense. The lane pre-selection is, where is that next car going to be coming? Where is that next vehicle going to be? Is it going to be always on my right side? If that's the case, that means that my left leg is probably going to be getting a harder workout than my right. And that maybe that's what I want clinically. So I choose that on purpose, right? Or random, it can just be random, that's self-explanatory. Frontal is that whatever lane I happen to be in, that's where the next vehicle is going to be coming. So I'm going to always need to be shifting. So again, it's keeping that patient engaged by giving them a lot to think about while they're exercising at the same time. Okay, so you can get an idea when I'm talking about customization, where engagement, lower level patients, higher level patients, all of those types of things, you start to get an idea what our clinical indications and objectives look like. So we talked a little bit about some of the folders, and the neuro rehab is really designed to work on neural drive and motor timing, right? So again, it can be active assisted if I need to, I can move forward, but really great for most of our general populations, but also including stroke recovery, neuromuscular re-ed, anybody who has difficulty with coordination, ataxia, symmetry, etc. We have the orthopedic rehab program, right, where we're working on active or active assisted range of motion, maybe very gentle range of motion. status post some sort of fracture or surgical repair of an orthopedic problem. Maybe they have osteoarthritis and I'm just trying to get some gentle range of motion, warming those limbs up with maybe minimal or low resistance levels so that that patient can get ready to do some other activities. So that ortho mode, again, allows us to limit the force. So we were looking at the force output. And then cardiopulmonary, I talked a little bit about the parameters with the heart rate monitor, but let's talk a little bit about, that heart rate zone and that aerobic work zone and really having that patient actively get a good solid 10, 15, 20 minutes of aerobic exercise. We can do that and we can use that in any of the settings really, but cardiopulmonary rehab for sure. So hopefully this is kind of giving you an idea that we can really customize and adapt it for almost all the clinical indications that we're used to seeing in the clinic. I've talked a lot about most of these on here now. And what our indications lead us to are our objectives for therapy. Again, why is the therapist choosing to use this as part of their tool? Because they want to work on that fine motor control. They want some neuromuscular re-ed, right? We want to work on coordination. Maybe I need to work on muscle pumping and just reciprocal movement, but this person is not able to walk for any length of time. This is a great way to get some reciprocal movement of these muscles in the lower extremity. And we can actually help with edema or range of motion. It's stable, safe, active assisted exercise, really some great options. I like to talk a lot about how the OmniCycle can be used to add a layer of intensity, or when I'm working with the OmniCycle, what can I do to make it even better? So I wanted to talk a little bit about how this adds an extra level. Some of it I have alluded to already, but there is some cognitive processing that has to happen. They're not just, closing their eyes and sitting there, right? You're saying, get that soccer ball, move to the right, move to the left, having them process through and then make some motor planning decisions is really, really beneficial. Multi-step instructions, really getting them to think through what they're doing by engaging them. Dual task opportunities. A dual task training is very important. They should be able to do one performance while they're thinking of something else, or maybe having a conversation. Talking, maybe doing some math problems. You can add some dual task opportunities while they are on the OmniCycle. We have the ability to add eStim component. We have some patterned eStim for the upper and lower extremity that is a symmetrical pattern or reciprocal, where it's going to be going right, left, that just reinforces, right, a little bit of that neuro re-ed when it comes to symmetry and muscle performance. We could also be adding it to postural muscles, maybe sitting unsupported as a goal for this patient. Well, while they're on the OmniCycle, add a level of intensity to those paraspinal muscles and add eStim. That can be accomplished very easily during an OmniCycle session. I mentioned cardiovascular and aerobic exercise goals. I love to teach and talk about using the OmniCycle as an interval training tool. Very often our patients are very limited in their cardiovascular performance. And sometimes we can get them to do a longer session and get a really good cardiovascular workout by incorporating intervals. And how we can do that is we can take that main screen and say, Mrs. Smith, we're going to, after our warm up at 0 resistance, I'm going to push you up to the resistance level 2. And I want you to pedal at this revolutions rate for a minute. And then I'm going to let you break and we're going to go back down to 0 resistance for another minute. And then we'll go back up and we'll go back down. Right? So you're adding that higher intensity and then backing off and letting them have a little recovery. But that is a very valuable way of using the OmniCycle for cardiovascular goals. We can also do that for fall prevention. So I wanted to give an example for this. I'm a big believer in, especially if I'm doing an upper extremity cycle setup, if that person has trunk control, sitting balance, seating and positioning goals, maybe they're a Hoyer transfer because they're just so weak they can't even sit unsupported safely. I can have them in that wheelchair. I can bring them forward. I can put their feet on the floor. I can have them bring their back off of that backrest and have them do the OmniCycle while they are sitting unsupported. And that will automatically start engaging more trunk muscles, right? And this might have to be an interval as well. Sit up for a minute, relax back for a minute. Sit up for a minute, relax back for a minute. But another really great way of taking a very skilled approach to layering different goals and layering different activities while I'm having that patient get this extended exercise session on the OmniCycle. Okay, so let's talk about data and documentation. The first thing I wanted to say is that at the end of the session, all of our options are going to give you a report, right? How long did the patient actually do the cycle? What activity out of that time, how much were they actively participating? You can see in this example, it was pretty low. Only 6% of that 10 minutes was that patient actively able to do work. So I might be looking at that and saying, you know what, this is a goal of mine. I want to get that 6% of activity in 10 minutes up to 30% of activity in 10 minutes, right? So I'm going to be working on their endurance and their tolerance. It also is showing you, this is a lower extremity example of a report because it's showing me the difference between my left and my right lower extremity. And you can see clearly here, they're not using their left leg nearly as well as they're using their right. So again, that is an objective piece of data that I can put into my documentation, and I can even set a goal for myself that will be that's something that I'm looking towards changing, okay? And then I wanted to do a little teaser to what we're gonna go over in a couple of minutes. We do have this AC Plus interconnectivity option, and at the end of that cycle, when we have this installed, if we have the pathway to our medical record, we're going to be able to scan this code, and that data will be transferred over to our medical record. So Amy's going to get into that at the end of our presentation today. As I've sort of been discussing with you, the OmniCycle is not just something to kind of take up time in the therapy session. It is a purposeful exercise with a lot of thought behind the choices that the therapist is making, and a lot of monitoring and cueing and assisting from the perspective of the biofeedback is going to be happening during that session. So we want to make sure we're documenting it and giving a good sense of what was happening and why we chose what we chose. So this is an example of somebody that they chose the active assisted cycle with lower extremity pedal radius set so that person was getting 50 degrees of knee flexion, right? So they were able to measure it. They knew exactly where they wanted to be. They changed the pedal, that crank arm adjustment. They did it for 5 minutes on the neuro mode, in a 5 RPM for 10 minutes. So this was a pretty slow process. We're doing it for range of motion in this example, right? I provided cues throughout the session to promote knee activation, maintaining that 5 RPMs between 5 and 10 with guided breathing for relaxation, trying to get that patient to relax. And then sort of a summary. They were able to improve. This is what their pain level was. Maybe there were some edema goals that were being measured. This is sort of like that summary, possibly at the end of the week, et cetera. So it's a good example. Here's another example where we're talking about heart rate, right? So I'm doing the active assisted upper extremity, heart rate and blood O2 sats were monitored with pulse ox. The patient was doing the reversed to enable backward pedaling to encourage postural muscles. They did it for 10 minutes. This is what I did as a therapist, right? Cueing them to maintain that posture, to encourage the breathing techniques, to meet that target heart rate goal with the RPMs, and then it's kind of a summary at the end. So you can kind of see all of those decisions that we made, all of those biofeedback options lend themselves towards that documentation of the skilled and purposeful exercise. Final 2 slides for me are going to be safety considerations and some tips. So safety. This is not intended for unsupervised exercise sessions. It's intended to be a purposeful monitored session. We want to remind you that this is not designed to be done standing up. Even if you're doing the upper extremities, it is a seated position, but you can have them be an unsupported seated position for sure. We want to make sure we're using those chair lockdown straps, right? So on the front axle of the wheelchair. So here's a picture of how that looks. I've taken those hooks that we saw earlier and I've attached them to that front lower portion of the wheelchair, and that's a safety lockdown. We want to know that if we are using eStim during the OmniCycle session, as I mentioned a few slides ago, we want to monitor that the lead wires are in a position where they are not going to be caught up in the crank arm or the arm pedal at all. So we want to make sure we're draping those wires away from those portions of the OmniCycle. The foot pedal should remain on at all times, and we want to monitor loose clothing. So if you have very loose, flowy clothing, we do want to make sure that we are monitoring and keeping those contained so there's no injury or no potential for them getting caught with the rhythmic cycle parts, excuse me. tips, how the patient is aligned can impact that biofeedback with the lower extremities. So make sure we're looking that they're not sitting crooked, their hips aren't angled funny. That will make a difference with both arms and legs. We want to make sure that the crank arms on the pedals are the same. If they are different, that will change that biofeedback power reception. It will give us a faulty number. We want to make sure that we have the appropriate resistance levels, right? That freewheeling where they're going super fast and it's just flying is really not conducive to applying pressure. So we might not be getting biofeedback options appropriate at that point. And then we do have a sonic stop where if there's a loud noise, it will stop the machine. I told you that was a safety feature. Sometimes that stops too often in a very loud gym space, for example. So if you go into that toolbox in the system setting, you will see there is a sensitivity setting for the sensory mic. And then we also have the ability to alter the power that the motor can produce for somebody who has very heavy, very weak patient. We might get a max power exceeded message and we can make the adjustment as needed going through that wrench or toolbox button. Okay, tons of stuff. And really your clinical program coordinator and managers, we can go over a lot of these other details if they come up, and the user manual is really great too. But I hope that gives you a flavor of all of the different exciting ways that the OmniCycle can be utilized, from very low functioning Hoyer dependent patients in a wheelchair to somebody sitting unsupported, maybe doing a really good dynamic exercise for a really good aerobic workout. We're going to switch over now to Lindsay, who's just going to walk through an exercise just to kind of give you the idea of how this flows. So she'll be able to set that up, and I'm going to stop my sharing here. I'm pretty sure I need to do that. And let Lindsay take over. I'll be probably walking through some of this with her while she performs it on the OmniCycle. Hey, Lindsay.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, good. Okay. So can you show us a picture of the bike and how we're going to get things set up here so you guys kind of see that setting. We get the turn it on. We'll get that system info. And then she's going to bring that chair up, and we're going to show you an example for just a minute or two of the upper extremity soccer. So she'll bring it close. We're going to set it up and get her going here. So she has to choose soccer, right? So remember that bar at the top? She's going to go ahead and press that bar until she sees the soccer come through. So keep pressing the bar, Lindsay. There we go. And you can see in the bottom left corner, it's set up for the lower extremity, but I want to do the upper extremity. So we're going to press that foot, and that foot is going to then change over to a hand, right? And then at this point, I need to go into that toolbox. So she's going to press the wrench. She's going to be in the soccer already. So she's going to open up the soccer folder. And then she's going to go down one spot to level. She's going to open up level. Oops. And then she's going to go down, and we're going to choose moderate. And then she's going to go ahead and say, yes, that's what I want. Hit the bus and then hit the start button. We should be able to get right into where we're going to go. Perfect. So now we're going to hit start. And what I want you to see here is she doesn't have her hands on this machine. I'm assuming, is it unlocked? Lindsay, did you have the arms unlocked? Yeah.
Sorry, hold on one second.
There's that spasm piece I showed you about. She has to unlock the arms, right? So she hits start, and you can see that the cycle is actually going to be moving very slowly at that. Right now it's set on 5 revolutions per minute. She's going to put her hands on that. I hope she can do that. Yeah, there we go. And then you can see automatically, as soon as she starts going faster, the RPM has increased. And now she's onto that goalie net, and she needs to slow down a little bit, Lindsay. Block that soccer ball. Go ahead. So these are the kinds of cues you're going to be giving, right? So she wants to go a little faster. That will move the goalie up just a little bit. And this is a typical, go ahead, up higher. You can see she's having a little trouble controlling that goalie. I tell people, when you see that, Lindsay, I'm going to cue you after this next ball to go ahead and increase your resistance up to like 2 or 3. So if you can press the resistance level up to 2 or 3, now do your cycle. Sometimes it's too hard with 0 resistance to control the speed of that goalie. So when you add a little resistance, she gets a little bit more motor control ability, and she can fine tune her positioning. Okay, perfect. So let's say we're done our time frame. She's going to hit stop. And then she's gonna hit stop one more time. And then what we're gonna get is we're gonna get that report. And if you zoom in a little bit closer, again, in this particular report, we're seeing her duration, how much of that time she was actively participating, how accurate she was, how much of the time, 62% of the time, was she in the correct RPM zone of 30 to 45 RPM. So you can see I can take all of that information and add it to my documentation really nicely. One thing I'll point out that I guess Amy's going to be going over is the QR code. I'm assuming that we would hit up there where that QR code is, but we'll go over that in a little bit more depth, I think, as we're going forward. Okay, so that's a quick example of that. Let's switch over. We're going to hit stop again. It's going to take us back to our home screen. I obviously see we're still on the soccer. I'd like to demonstrate the traffic jam as an option. So we're going to change from soccer to traffic jam. Yep, it's going to need to be a lower extremity, but go ahead. Yep, go ahead. And we're going to go to the porcupine, and there's the traffic jam. So remember, this is another one of those that we have to go. Woo.
Sorry.
I think she's sitting down. We're going to have to go into the toolbox, remember, and choose the level. It will default to the minimal level if we don't do that. And I would like to show you the moderate level. So we're going to open up the toolbox with the wrench button. We're going to open up the traffic jam folder. We're going to go to level, move down an arrow, and open that up, and we're going to choose moderate. Yep. So we'll choose that. Yep, hit the plus button. And then we're going to actually arrow down. I want to show you. See that lane pre-selection one? She goes one more time. Yeah, if she opens that one up, that's where you can choose that left, random, right. You know, you can customize it. We're going to keep it on random. So we're going to go ahead and get started with this option. Okay, so we're on the lower extremity. This is only a lower extremity option, and she's going to hit start. And when she hits start, the pedals will start going again at that baseline 10 RPM. And then as she engages and starts working, take a look, we get that yellow light floating up there on the light bulb. And then now I'm on the traffic jam. And again, her goal is to avoid the car that's coming in front of her. So she has chosen to use her right leg to get into the right lane. If she speeds up her RPMs, so Lindsay, go as fast as you can. I'm giving her.
I might hit the car.
Right leg, right leg. Perfect. You can see that the scenery starts going by faster and she reaches that car. So the higher RPMs will actually move the scenery. And now there's another vehicle, so she's going to need to get out of the way from that one and go back to either even cycling or use her left leg. Perfect. So this was designed to kind of just give you an idea about how all the stuff I talked about kind of seamlessly works into relatively quickly a setup and an initiation of a program for a patient. So we're going to go ahead and hit stop on this one. Okay, and then one more time. So we can pause it if we want to. And then there we have our report. Again, how accurate did she, how many cars did she hit? So is she paying attention? Is she cognitively able to make the changes? And how much of that 1 minute and 4 seconds was she actively pedaling? She was pedaling for 84% of the time. So hopefully that gives you a really good starting point to think about the OmniCycle and all the different ways you can use it.